Добрий день.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olena, and Ukrainian Media Center continues its operation. Today, our next activity is devoted to the presentation of a study, the study called Key Narratives of Russian Propaganda in the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine in summer of 2025. So we will discuss this topic today. The study will be presented by the Realna Gazeta team, and our speakers joining us in the studio today are Andrii, Dikhtiarenko, editor-in-chief of Realna Gazeta, Luhansk region. Also joining us is Olena Fetisova, web editor of the Realna Gazeta, and Yana, Osadcha, deputy editor-in-chief, managing editor of Realna Gazeta. Also joining us online are the colleagues from Realna Gazeta, Yulia Didenko, the editor-in-chief of News of Donbas News, and Alexei Artyukh, Media Tribune of Luhansk region. Thank you for joining us. So, Andrii, the floor is yours. First of all, let me ask you, how does the Realna Gazeta work now? How do you continue your operations? How has your audience changed within this period? Definitely there are changes, so what are they, and what does the audience look like now? Well, I think that will be a brief introduction so we don't drift away from our topic. Well, actually, within these more than 11 years that we've been working on the topic of occupied territories, unfortunately occupied territories, we've only grown stronger, we've grown our team, we were able to focus more on profound topics, the study of the processes taking place in occupied territories, and we continue defending our internally displaced persons. So I think the less is the focus of the state on those topics, the more we have to work in those areas. And I want to thank everybody who supports us, who donates us. And today we will be talking about one of the projects that exists as an attempt of a different media that still continue studying the topic of temporarily occupied territories to jointly do the propaganda. We've joined within .hub project. There is a number of media. Not all of them are with us, unfortunately. Not all of them are joining us in this conference, but all of them are doing something what they can in their areas. We were supported by such an international organization as Open Information Partnership, an organization that unites media investigators, and Zinc. They were also helping us a lot. And today we would like to focus on the latest key narratives of Russian propaganda, to tell about the way we're fighting it, how do we cover it, what do we emphasize, how do we try to keep in touch with the people in temporarily occupied territories. And our idea was to talk also about some potential future challenges, and I hope that it will be interesting to our audience too. Thank you, Mr. Andrii. So, Olena, let's proceed to the presentation of the study. Hello, everyone. My name is Olena Fetisova, and I can keep talking about Russian propaganda on and on, but I'll try to fit in, well, how many minutes do I have? I'm not going to restrict you. Well, you should have. Well, so we've reviewed those narratives that currently circulate in temporarily occupied territories. Well, where do I click? Click on the arrows. Well, I hope our technical team is going to help you to switch. All right. So all of the narratives that were lately circulating in temporarily occupied territories in this Russian segment, well, we've divided them in three categories: ideological integration, social and economical integration, and colonial control. And the biggest group is ideological integration, objective of which is to shape the impression that the inhabitants of those territories are Russian. You know, the word Russia or Russian is repeated as a once in 3 words. Well, how is it expressed? Through eradication of Ukrainian language and culture, through educational programs that exist in temporarily occupied territories. Now there is no Ukrainian language in those even territories that have only recently been occupied. Libraries, book festivals, theaters, everything is happening under the Russian so-called cultural code. They developed the narratives that those are the historic regions of Russia and they were just brought back to Russia. And basically everything, there cannot be an exhibition of something. It should be, there should be some ideological content to it. Well, militarization of the youth and teenagers, despite summers, the youth is being sent to the military camps. They are taught to pilot the drones, play Zernitsa. Some of the groups of children are sent to Chechnya, to a camp where they yell Ahmad is power. And basically it's happening all year round. And what's important, it's not only for, it doesn't only apply for teenagers, but for all of the children starting from kindergarten. Also, there is a narrative that Luhansk and Donetsk are Russia. That's an omnipresent narrative. Also, they practice such a flash mob as unfolding the Russian flag. Also, they hand children the Russian flags on the stage, emphasizing that now they are the citizens of Russia. Then demonization of Ukraine. Such actors as Rodion Miroshnik or Russian Commissioner for Human Rights, Lvova Belova, they tell about the crimes of Ukraine, mass execution, abduction of children, everything without any proofs or evidences. Shaping of myth about the continuity of generations between the Kyiv Rus and the modern Russia. You know, they put their benchmarks. For example, in Luhansk, there is such a monument called Hostra Mohyla. They reconstructed it, and it was a monument, a memorial to the warriors of World War II, but there they've installed the sculptures dating back to the times of revolution and civil war, and then there was a Russian soldier, and then Donbas militia, and then the modern Russian military, and they are all presented as defenders of Donbas. Then there was another memorial near the occupied Krystalna where they want to implement another narrative, like the King Igor was defending it, and now we want to install a sculpture, a monument to a Russian warrior, like that one was a defender and this one is a defender too. And shifting of focus of Ukrainian agenda to Russian agenda, quite an interesting narrative. For example, when something significant is going on in Ukraine, like the beginning of the full-scale invasion, for that time they appoint some other activities of theirs. Like for them, for us, it was a full-scale invasion. For them, it was the day of the Russian army. And in both cases, the emphasis is on the militarized nature of the activity, and they hold both activities in parallel. Or the day of the Heavenly Hundred and the day of the Revolution of Dignity. They call it a coup, and they make publications that devoted to the Ukrainian coup, as they call it. Or, for example, International Day of Commemoration of Victims of Holocaust. They put it in parallel with relief of Leningrad blockade, and this topic of Leningrad blockade is absolutely alien for Luhansk information space. There are no monuments, there are no memorial boards. Meanwhile, there are memorial boards for Holocaust. So we smoothly forget about Holocaust, and all of the attention, all of the school activities, everything is switched to Leningrad. Meanwhile, this topic, I mean, it's been studied in the school, but it's not so painful for Luhansk. So basically, this is the memorial, the Gostra with the newly installed sculptures of the defenders of the Russian lands. Another significant block, social economic legitimization of occupation, is the creation of Russia as the image of savior of Donbass, those who save and rescue. Russia is the rescuer and restorer. There are regions of Russia who are in charge of restoration of other districts of Luhansk region, well, basically destroyed by Russia. They build roads, they repair roofs, and it's a civilizational gift from Russia. It's like without Russia, they wouldn't have made it. Well, basically, it's that they say that Russia brings civilization. Everything good comes from Russia and everything bad comes from Ukraine. Then propaganda coverage of economy. It means involvement of temporarily occupied territories to some significant Russian activities. For example, Russian Economic Forum that has taken place. It was attended by Pasechnik. Different goods were presented there that are manufactured in temporarily occupied territories. But again, not all of the goods manufactured in temporarily occupied territories are the brands that are involved in like activities of those persons, of the top-level government officials, of the Lugansk government. And now, again, the freshest narrative is water anti-crisis in temporarily occupied Donetsk region. It dates back to Friday, that in Donetsk and Luhansk region there is a catastrophe with the water because of the destroyed aqueducts, because of the water level falling in water reservoirs. And the people, they really suffer without water. The water is supplied within just a couple of hours, few times a week. People seriously start thinking about leaving Donetsk because they don't see their future in there. They record addresses to Putin. They exploit children. They record videos of children saying, "Give us water, we cannot wash ourselves." And at the same time, those pro-government, pro-Russian government media show different anti-crisis footage of water trucks coming from Moscow to Donetsk, or repair teams sent from Moscow to Donetsk to repair the aqueducts. But the scale of those activities is not even comparable, because 75 water tank trucks cannot provide sufficient water to Donetsk and Makiivka agglomeration. I think that according to those calculations that they made, if you divide that water to all of the residents, it will be 0.6 liters of water per day per person. And this catastrophe with the water in the Donetsk region, it's absolutely unclear how to rectify it, how to find a way out of this crisis. You know, it's like putting a plaster on an open wound, putting a bandage on an open wound. So this is the symbol of Luhansk, the worker with a torch, and that was a stand with the Luhansk ice cream. Colonial control and subjugation of population.
Colonial control and subjugation of the population through displacement, control, and creation of unequal conditions. So it's kind of like they care, but in fact it's all a profit for the occupier. As I said before, like for example, building roads, doing reconstruction. This is all done by immigrants that's been brought from the mainland, from Russia. And accordingly, the profits that is coming from this, they don't go to the communal services of the occupied territories. They remain inside the Russian firms on the Russian territory, and the workers themselves remain with very little salaries. And the narrative about the Russians will solve all your problems. For example, they point, like, for example, a city hall chief is appointed from among the Russians, not Ukrainians. Or if, for example, it goes about some kind of living condominium or some other construction, it is being done as a display window. It's more like a show-off for their efforts and not the practical achievements. So, for example, in Luhansk, the real estate credits are not provided with the interest rate that is affordable for the local population, but those who can afford this, like for example those who live and work in Russia and they come to Lugansk, they can't do it. So all in all, it turns out that the only people who can afford this real estate credits are those people who come from Russia, not the local population. Also, another narrative that is being pushed is the narrative about spies, and then they are talking about some spies that have been detained. However, there is no direct evidence that they were spies. And when our media investigators try to get to the bottom of things, they understand. It turns out that there was no actual crime committed, even by the Russian law. And another narrative that we would like to stress on, it's the same narrative that the Russian Federation has been pushing since forever. It's about cheap ice cream or cheap sausage. For example, if you are living in the small town in the Luhansk Oblast and you don't really have enough money to go to some kind of resort or to buy some big TV screen, and that's where the Russians come. And they start offering, let's go to this or that camp in the Russian bordering region or inside Lugansk Oblast, and let's imagine the people that live there. They don't see much entertainment, and now they are being offered some kind of tours, and there is bloggers coming and some kind of official representatives, and they arrange parties, and then this is actually is what's called formation of the image of happiness. So I'm not saying that there is no truth there, but it's around 10%. The rest is just propaganda. And it all boils down to the attempt to transform the mentality of the people that live in the occupied territories into a Russian national citizen, and basically is distilled into the understanding that Russia has come and provided you with all the opportunities, with all the possibilities that you might have, and you should be grateful for that. On the other hand, Ukraine is being described as something that was an obstacle to the self-development of a person. And they are using some kind of adaptive narrative. So they're not pushing about necessity to serve in the Russian army like it's obligatory, but they will lead to this thought step by step and gradually. Also, as you can see, this is the article about this so-called spy who was detained in Luhansk. His name is Alexander Ryzhkov, and he's showing the trident symbol. Thank you. Let's stop at this slide. This is an example of why it is important to monitor what's happening in the occupation, in the occupied territory. This work, this job has to be done by national media level. However, unfortunately, this is what we have to cover. This was posted by the local prosecutor's office, and it was distributed by all the pro-Russian Luhansk medias. They distributed it within minutes, literally, and it was just one case of a Ukrainian patriot, and it was given as a evidence of the resistance going on, and that's what we were leading towards when we were giving this information. And only after that, the national media started to pay attention to this fact. So it was our merit that we extracted this piece of information from obscure Russian informational field and put it into the Ukrainian informational field, and that led to the distribution of this information, proliferation of this information. Okay, let's continue with what other activities. Okay, so next we have examples how exactly we are reacting to the challenges of Russian propaganda in our newspaper. This is one of my favorite articles in the newspaper. We wrote it after the 9th May, and it's about how in Luhansk, in nursery, they celebrate the Victory Day. The children are being dressed into military attire, the girls are being dressed into are playing the roles of widows. It was really cringe, but during Soviet times there was no such things because that's what they're trying to push as that this is some kind of tradition from Russian Federation. However, this was never like that because at the time the veterans were still alive and they attended these events, and what's happening now is just basically a horror, you know. When we are seeing this, you remember many of the bloggers mentioned how one of the boys was forced into playing a dead soldier or a wounded soldier, which is kind of doubtful in terms of how efficient this propaganda is. There is also another piece that we have given is that like they are trying to push a narrative that is basically boils down to the fact that there is no signs of military activities going on, and everything is okay. Like, for example, with the net operation, it was not really given in the Russian media. It was not discussed. It was just basically ignored, and only after some time they started publishing some kind of propaganda pieces trying to diminish the effectiveness of the operation. The next example is about the fake pieces of news, like, for example, about Mariupol citizens that are living in their town, like it was always a Russian city. There was never traditional clothes. Ukrainian traditional clothes were never present in this city. That's basically what their narratives are about. And Mariupol, while the truth is, Mariupol was always a Ukrainian city. It has never been a Russian city, in fact, and everyone who has seen Mariupol before it was destroyed knows that specifically during Ukrainian independence period, the Mariupol city has known the biggest development. Another piece is about the people that is directed towards the people who still remember the Mariupol, how it was before the war, and that's where they are trying to kind of replace the notion of local culture from Ukrainian to Russian. They're trying to impose such an image that is basically saying that there were never Ukrainian culture, traditions, or language in Mariupol city. And they're using a lot of underhanded methods when they're trying to do this. For example, some of the artists that used to be popular in Mariupol since before the full-scale invasion, and are trying to push the narrative about the artists that existed during the independence period. I would like to add a little bit. After a publication like that is coming out, we are starting to get feedback. I started to receive letters. It was big in the 90s. It was a big network of people who were communicating with each other. I was one of them, and those people started writing me, and they started to confirm everything. And it is interesting when you find one source and then the publication starts to live its own life, and you start to find new faces of this narrative, and you understand that, for example, Litvin that we mentioned today, he was never pro-Russian. He was always pro-peace, and how could he be a pro-Russian? This person is already dead, and Russians are using him as an example of the Russian culture representation in the region. Okay, and about a few more examples. What topics we are working on? What is actual critical questions, critical problems that are that exist in the Donetsk region. Some of the people are afraid to come out to the streets because they are afraid of some kind of ethnical groups that the media is talking about, and those people are afraid to come out and are complaining that they cannot feel like they're at home in their own city or town. And they are really concerned with the prices for the communal services, for the infrastructure services, and these questions are being ignored by Russian propaganda. It's just being silenced, basically. And people in Luhansk basically have lost an opportunity, have lost the possibility to live a peaceful life, and they cannot really address anybody with their problems in Lugansk. They need to go to Rostov, to the Russian region, to the Russian neighboring region, to resolve any kind of these infrastructure questions. And, this is kind of, can you imagine if the Kharkov inhabitants go to Kyiv with regards to the passport receipt question or some kind of other bureaucratic question? It's nonsense, right? So this is basically what happens in Luhansk right now, and they do, and we hear about that. We do communicate with those people. They tell us a lot about the occupation, about the life in the occupation, and it is very unfortunate, of course, that there is a lot of information about negative points of living under the occupation. So we see that there is a lot of failure in those territories regarding infrastructure, medical facilities, water, gas, electricity. And this is a everyday problem for people that stay in the occupied territory. Does it mean that Russians don't even try to resolve those problems? Well, they kind of do. Like, for example, this crisis that we mentioned, the water crisis. Well, first of all, they blame Ukraine, that Ukraine is not providing water to these regions. And this is despite the fact that during the first days of the full-scale invasion, they destroyed all the water facilities in the region. Like, for example, the Siversk-Donetsk channel was destroyed during the occupation, but nevertheless, they still keep blaming Ukraine. And when this problem with the water supply arose, they started building a Donbass channel. And it was basically put in charge of the Russian official person that was later arrested for corruption, and there were a lot of violations of technical requirements for this project, and we observed in February, for example, there was a huge technical problem there. Basically, it prevented the water from being supplied to the Donetsk region, and they lost a lot of time, despite the fact that this territory has been occupied a long time ago, and the problem could have been addressed a lot earlier. I think that nowadays we do have signs of that the problem will keep more and more serious. So this problem will become a real crisis, and we will have to announce this territory as a territory in need of humanitarian aid. And we don't know about how exactly the water is being checked or tested. We don't know. Maybe it's radioactive because we don't know. For example, there is not wide known information about that there was a nuclear tests under Yana that were conducted. So we don't know what kind of water they will be receiving. And regarding the diseases, all kinds of illnesses, when they don't really have any kind of solid medical care available for them in those regions. And in any serious cases, they again need to go to Russia, to the neighboring regions of Russia, or even further. Also about how the occupation administration is reacting to the things like that. So what they're basically doing right now, they are trying to clean out the deltas of different river sleeves and if we compare how they do it in practice and how it's supposed to be done, we see that it's just basically being done only in half. Like they started cleaning, and there was supposed to be a deepening of the river bed. However, they only cleaned the debris on the surface in order to have opportunity to make pictures of it, to put it on Instagram, and that's it. And I would like to engage with the media from Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Do you have something to add to what was presented right now?
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start. The colleagues were telling everything in a very profound detail about what's going on in temporarily occupied territories. What I can add that back in 22-23, when the territories were only newly occupied, they all started saying, like, let's wait just a year or two and the situation is going to improve, that things are going to get better. There were even narratives that soon we're going to live just like in Chechnya. But now the situation has changed drastically. The problems have not gone anywhere, and in the majority of cases they got worse. Now that we talk about the water, there is the situation, there is a difficult situation with the burning forest too. So the problem of forest fires, it was not covered by any of the Russian media, none of their official sources. So that problem was absolutely, completely ignored. And when it was unreal to keep silent, when all of the social networks were saying that the scale of fire is incredible, they had to respond to publish some press releases. The advantage of Ukrainian media is that we don't keep silent about any problems. We cover them, and many people from occupation, they look for the truth in Ukrainian resources, even despite their political position, because truth is right there. We tell way more about what's going on in temporarily occupied territories rather than the media which work there. Yet another important thing is that there are new actors emerged, and that there was a situation with migrants and with medicine mentioned, but people, in fact, they feel themselves unprotected because, see, for example, we talk about the Kadyrov troops. It doesn't make any sense to contact local police, local law enforcement, because they're just not going to respond. And it was mentioned that many say that they feel themselves at home as if they're guests, and this is the way it is. And Ukrainian media give people information, they give them opportunity to find out what's really going on in their area, but the scale of the problems is way bigger. There were people mentioned who were detained in temporarily occupied territories, and it seems to me that during these times such intimidating activities have grown in scale, and there are more materials issued by the Russian law enforcement as investigative committee of Russian Federation. They demonstrate detention of the people. And it seems to me that the occupiers continue seeing it as a big problem, because even despite any statements about the population that was waiting for Russia over there, they understand that things are not like that, and a lot of people, they continue being loyal to Ukraine, so such intimidating activities are going to continue. In fact, the majority of them are technically designed and staged, but just like in a case of Mr. Ryzhkov, sometimes the people who are being arrested because of their pro-Ukrainian position, the number of such people in reality is way larger, and it's good that the relocated media touch upon those problems because in the majority of cases, the publicity is what allows to keep that person alive, to save their lives. If the person is known, if there is some information about them on the media, such people cannot just disappear. And there were multiple cases like this when, thanks to the publicity, people's lives were saved. That's why I want to thank the colleagues for their meticulous analytical work that they have been doing within years, because Realna Gazeta has been working on those problems with the beginning of the war in Ukraine from the year 2014. And thanks to that, Ukraine and the world find out about a lot of things. And shouldn't that work continue? In fact, no one would have ever written about that. Thank you, Alexei. Yulia, I would like to ask you to share your experience. Well, first of all, greetings everyone. I would like to thank colleagues for the wonderful research, quite an important work. Thank you for the wonderful job you've been doing within all those 11 years. So what I would like to add, when it comes to water, the problem really exists not only in the temporarily occupied territories of Luhansk and Donetsk region that were occupied way before, but this problem with the potable water is even jeopardizing in the newly occupied territories of Zaporizhia and Kherson region, and the propaganda work is really intense there, and there all of the accusations go. If in case of Luhansk and Donetsk regions, the propagandists accuse the armed forces of Ukraine and Ukraine in general, they accuse Ukraine of some water blockade, as they call it, through blocking of Seversky Donetsk Donbas channel in Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. The work is on the way to accuse the Ukrainian armed forces in blowing the Kakhovka Dam, which resulted in such a jeopardizing situation. Yes, the situation may not be so acute as in the Donbas, in Donetsk and Luhansk region, but still the reason is the ruination of Kakhovka Dam. But the fact is that it was not Ukrainian troops who ruined it. That was already corroborated by a lot of experts. And again, when it comes to this water problem and other problems that exist in temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, what's interesting, in my opinion, is the way that all of the Russian propaganda system operates, the way that it works not only with classical media, TV, online media, but also they're quite active in their work in web format, including with different bloggers, leaders of public opinions, and stuff like that. And to me, it seems that those yells of such characters as Gubarev, Montan, or else they criticize the Russian government. They tell the truth about the situation with the water and with the so-called mobilization in the temporarily occupied territories. And they touch upon some real problems. And to me, it seems that it enables other people to just vent off their steam in the social networks. They can listen to Montan, Gubarev, and Tsarev, and they're like, okay, it creates the illusion of some pluralism of thoughts. In Ukraine, they say that it's only propaganda, but here are people who can criticize the government. To me, it seems it's kind of an additional feature. And when it comes to what the colleagues were telling about the lifestyle bloggers and the significant fraction of propaganda work is being done indirectly, that it uses such approaches, not to make it so directly visible, and it's the creation of those schools of bloggers in temporarily occupied territories, and then all those blogger networks, they communicated to the people in different social networks available like Telegram, TikTok, or else anywhere they are not blocked at, anywhere they have access to. They communicate those narratives necessary for Crimea, that everything is being reconstructed, the roads are being repaired. However, the roads are being only repaired to make sure that the military material can come through it. Again, construction. In Mariupol, it's some kind of, some colleagues who have the dwellings left in the temporarily occupied territories, and they say that when you buy real estate, it's either white box or gray box, but in their case it's a black box because they built a so-called Potomkin's village. They act as if everything is repaired outside, but if you enter that so-called repair building, everything is black inside. Even the walls between the apartments are not installed. And another summer trend, it was about the so-called summer offensive by Russian Federation, intimidating statements about them intending to capture the Dnipropetrovsk region. Shortly, we can see the intention on part of the Russian armed forces. We know they're not going to stop at the so-called borders of the Donetsk region. But on the other hand, is that part of a propaganda that works to make sure, like about the water, what they tell, to make sure that Donetsk gets good water, not like 2 hours in 3 days. They have to liberate all of the territory of the Donetsk region, and it becomes clear that if they have such an opportunity, they will advance further on. But those propaganda narratives about this summer offensive is that offensive, it has never been stopping. They just kept advancing, and they continue crawling around on and on. Again, talking about not only temporarily occupied territories, but generally propaganda activities, what I deem important to mention is that campaign that was initiated by Russian propaganda in the end of the spring, beginning of the summer, when there was a number of reports after the body of Victoria Roshina was returned from enemy's captivity, and it turned out that the body was returned without internal organs and with the signs of torture. They initiated an extensive propaganda campaign, not only in temporarily occupied territories, but also all around the world, to kind of, to overlap the real news with their propaganda narratives. They were making some exhibitions in different countries in their diplomatic offices, and it was 100% done for reason, specifically at that moment when a number of investigations were done in relation to Victoria's detention, and when European Commission responded, they started showing reaction to return of Victoria's body. So I think that was important to mention. Thank you very much, Yulia. Thank you, dear friends. Now that we have any questions or comments on the floor, please let me know about it. I can see Alexei wanting to add something. Yes, I would like to add that propaganda that emerges on the local level very frequently is being underestimated. It is being considered as something applying to some specific region, but in fact the propaganda disseminated in temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, it's aimed at the people who stay also abroad very frequently at Ukrainian refugees. I'm aware of the cases when all those messengers, all those news, and it all goes through different resources like Russian TV channels and local TV channels. And it also aims at working with the people in the chats that the life is improving. It's time to come back. I'm aware of the situations when people from Germany, from Croatia were coming back to temporarily occupied territories after they succumbed to those fables, and the reality turned out to be way more saddening than they were seeing in those social media. So it's important to understand that there is interest in countering this propaganda on part of the local media. Also, it should be present in our partners from European Union. Thank you, Alexei. We have a couple more minutes, and to finalize our broadcast, I would like to ask about some new challenges that you've identified during this research, during this study, now that you work with the narratives, with the content that is being consumed by the audience in temporarily occupied territories. So what are the challenges that you're seeing? Well, the challenges are numerous. The only thing I would like to say that for us, for our work, one of the biggest challenges is the work of Russian censure, Russian ministries, different agencies, which in reality are fighting against Ukrainian influence on those people remaining in temporarily occupied territories. And for Russian media space too, they do a lot to fully cover this information space. First of all, they do it using technical means. For them, there is a huge problem, and in fact, is the equally sharp weapon. There are messages that are available both in territories under Ukrainian control, in temporarily occupied territories, and in Russia as well. And one of such messengers is Telegram. We have discussion on the way in Ukraine what to do about Telegram, and the same discussion is going on in Russia. So in our case, we put it aside a little bit. They're now dealing with it directly. And first of all, what they do is they take a Chinese Great Firewall option, Great Firewall, yeah, or paywall, whatever it's called, I apologize. So they built one of their own to block, first of all, Ukrainian channels, but what's important is their attempt to create a super messenger, an equivalent to Chinese WeChat, in which, according to the concept of Kremlin, the residents of temporarily occupied territories, the residents of Russia, will spend the majority of their media activities. It should contain information, channels, payments, communications. Probably in future they will install some rating system to rate your communication with the financial institutions. And what's principal is the full control of your communications or even your clicks, full control of Russian special services over all of your activities. We have a slide to demonstrate it. So this messenger is called Max. The VKontakte team or VK team, which is developing it, are actively advancing it, actively promoting it in temporarily occupied territories. There is propaganda of this messenger in temporarily occupied territories. They try to get some influencers engaged quite actively. So what's dangerous about this messenger? It transmits data to the government. It gathers and collects information about the users. It's open information. But if you are reliable, you are supposed to use Max Messenger. And respectively, if you use other messengers, it may cause questions. So even now, you have to get prepared to this threat. Obviously, the data is being stored at Russian servers. They include technical information, and the users are urged to stop using if they don't like the messenger. Stop using it, but the information is preserved on the servers within the 30 days to come, and they are using this messenger functionality, which is still restricted, but they are expanding it. It's going to develop. There is already a resolution taken by Kremlin to develop it. There will be video, financial services, and other services integrated to this messenger. And first of all, this Max, what they want is to replace Telegram as one of the key messengers the people use, in which people talk to which the people use to communicate with the people in the territories under Ukrainian control. And the question is how to respond. Does Ukraine have an action plan? How to counter the use of that messenger by the occupiers? Yeah, I have a plan. It's brief. If you have friends, relatives, readers, listeners in the temporarily occupied territories, please warn them. Please make sure that they have an active VPN. It's a fight of armor and a shell. They keep banning something, but some VPNs are still working there. They still work in Russian. VPN in temporarily occupied territory is not a way to access darknet. It's a necessity to access Instagram, Telegram, and normally use internet just in a way that it was conceived to be. So VPN is just a must-have in temporarily occupied territory. So please warn those people staying there to install VPN. Well, and it becomes illegal for Kremlin. I'm sorry, they start fighting all of the VPNs. The advertising is free. The advertising of VPN is being published. The dissemination is being punished, but the use of VPN is still unpunished. Those who download it in temporarily occupied territories, they are not going to be punished so far. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the profound study. And I want to thank all of the media who continue working on this topic, and those who continue communicating and writing for our temporarily occupied territories. And we want to thank you as a platform who's been supporting us for a lot of years. Ukraine Media Center, you're cool. Thank you. And we want to thank our security and defense forces who provide us with an opportunity to gather here and discuss such important topics. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.